It's Wednesday the 24th of June. It's going to be a real scorcher of a day today. Heading up to London. Didn't play poker at the Woodman pub last night because I wanted to watch the England versus Ghana game with my fiance. Oh, that was a frustrating game. Anyway, still there, room for improvement. Last week I actually did a video on how to play brick turns with both bluffs and value, and a little bit later we'll be posting a video on how to maybe change your strategy when the turn brings in a nut changing card like a flush, for example. So look at the different nuances of how to proceed from that particular situation. Anyway, catch you later. Hopefully I'll make the train. Bye. In the first situation, we've got Queen 6 suited on the button. It folds around to us and we open to our 12 and we get called by Mr. Cod again in the big blind. The flop comes down the same as it did in the previous examples. 10-5-2 flush draw. Mr. Cod checks to us and we in position range c-bet 12 to see if we can actually get Mr. Cod to raise off his strong hands or call with his weak hands. He just calls. So his range here is going to be various draws, 10x under pairs to the 10, pair plus draws, those sorts of hands in his range. The turn comes in the ace of spades. So that gives us a very strong flush, can play for stacks hand, but also it uncaps Mr. Cod. So he himself now could have some very strong hands on this particular turn. So he checks to us, and the incentives of our hand are to fundamentally keep in the weaker hands in Mr. Cod's range, so we can actually get more value out of those on the turn and then on the river. If he has actually got a flush himself, he still might do us a favour and raise that off, and unless it's a nut flush or second nut flush, we're going to be ahead. So he checks to us and we bet small. He calls. So going into the river, Mr. Cod's range here is predominantly going to be 10x, maybe some strange 2 pair, even possibly might have stumbled into a set of 8s, could have 10-8 maybe, hands like that. Or he might actually have a weak flush draw, hands like that. So we go into the river, which is a brick 7, and Mr. Cod checks again. So in this situation, what I'd be looking at would be, okay, if Mr. Cod has got to this river with a very good 10x, what would I need to bet here in order to make that fold, with him knowing that there's a potential flush out there and I've been betting for the 2 previous streets? So I think in this situation, if I was to bet something just over about £100, I could probably get a decent 10 to fold with the flush out there. So I then say, okay, what would I actually bet in order to get a hand like King 10 or Queen 10 to actually call? And that would be something less, somewhere around about maybe 60, 65. So I bet 65 and Mr. Cod does what we are hoping and he calls and he shows King 10. So we got 3 streets of value out of Mr. Cod for a very, very decent return here, making about £100 worth. And in this next situation, we're going to be looking at when we actually have a complete air bluff. But our incentives on the flop and the turn are the same. They just diverge when we actually get to the river. So now we have Queen 6 of diamonds on the button. Folds around to us, we open up, Mr. Cod calls, same flop comes down, wet dynamic, 10-5-2 flush draw. We have complete air. Mr. God checks, and we put in our range bet, looking for him to raise off his very strong hands or call with his weak hands. He actually calls. The 8 of spades comes in. This now uncaps Mr. Cod. He could have some very, very strong hands. His flushes could have come in. But we have still a complete air bluff here. So when he checks to us, which he does, what we want to do is bet exactly like we did when we had the strong value Queen 6 of spades. Again, in order to try to get Mr. Cod to raise off his flushes, if he just calls, then his range might be still very wide and weak, comprising of maybe some underpairs, again hands like 6-5 maybe with a spade. He's got potentially decent 10x in there still, and we want to drag that wide and weak range to the river. So we bet small and he just calls. The river then comes in, the 7 of clubs. Mr. Cod checks to us. So now we do the inverse of what we did when we had a strong flush, when we had the really good can play for stacks hand. Here we go. What would I bet in order to get a good 10x to call? So in this situation, I'd probably be looking to go 60 or 65. So I then inverse that and go, what would I then bet in order to get a good 10x to fold, knowing there's a flush out there and Mr. God hasn't raised off at all, hasn't indicated he's got a flush, and he hasn't led into me either on the river, which is often a situation that does happen when the flush comes in. So I think here, if I was to bet somewhere over £100, maybe 105, 110, I can get Mr. Cod to fold his good 10x. So I bet 105 and he folds. We win. And Mr. Cod had King 10 of diamonds again. And finally, how may we play this if we actually had a really good can play for stacks hand on the flop that then gets devalued with the nut changing flush coming in on the turn? Well, let's see. It folds around to us on the button. We've got a pair of 5s. We raise. We get called. Flop comes down the same. This time we have middle set, a really strong can play for stacks hand. Mr. Cod checks to us, but again we just range c-bet, looking to get Mr. Cod to raise off his strong hands or call with his weak hands. He just calls. Now when the turn comes in, the 8 of spades, Mr. Cod is uncapped. He could have some very strong hands now. He could have flush draws himself. And our set of 5s, our can play for stacks hand, has been somewhat devalued. So it is really only now a thick value hand. But we still have some similar incentives when Mr. Cod does actually check to us. We still want to bet fairly small into his uncapped range, because if he does have a flush, we'd like to know, and to then decide a response if he does raise in relation to his raise size, etc., etc. But when we bet our 20, he just calls. So this is probably indicating that he doesn't have a flush. And when we get to the river with the 7 of clubs, the brick comes in. Again, Mr. Cod doesn't lead into us, where he may do if he's actually got a good flush. He checks. So our incentives here, we don't have a strong flush ourselves, but we have a thick value hand in terms of our set. So we can still bet 3 streets for value, but again, we can still target those good 10s or maybe some 10-8, 2 pairs that have come in. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to run into one of his maybe lower value flushes. So we may actually go somewhere around about 50 to 60 here. We don't want to value own ourselves. but we want to get a call from a good 10 or maybe a 2-pair hand. So we go 50 and we get the call and we win, and Mr. Cod has yet again got King 10 of diamonds for a good top pair. In these 3 different situations, the incentives of our hands on both the flop and the turn were really all the same, but they just diverged on the river depending on what we wished to achieve on that river, by often asking the inverse question around what we would do if we wanted a particular part of villain's range to call, and then how much would we need to bet if we needed to bluff that, or if we wanted to bluff to get a fold for a particular bucket of villain's range, how much less would we then need to bet in order to get a call. So hopefully that's a useful sort of insight into the thought process that goes into these nut changing turns, in this situation when the flush comes in. Slightly different to when the brick turn comes in, and I'll put the link to the previous video on the brick turns here. Enjoy.